Hi, this is Councillor Glenn Gower. I'm in my office at City Hall. I wanted to talk a little bit about OC Transpo. I've had a number of emails from people asking why isn't the city cutting back OC Transpo services, even though there's a drop, a real dip in ridership. And I want to try to explain it. I started writing a note for my website about this, but I thought it might be easier to just explain on a video. First of all, we are seeing a drop in ridership. Ridership right now is about 30% of what it usually is, and that's due to COVID and many people working from home. But I think it's worth asking who's still riding the bus. So these are people who still need to go into work in person. They can't work from home. And they're also people who are taking the bus because they don't have an alternative. They don't have a private vehicle that they can use to get to where they're going, work or shopping or medical appointments or whatever it may be. So we're seeing transit being used right now as an essential service. And this is a really important thing to mention. Without transit, the people who keep our city running cannot get to work. So these are folks, frontline workers, retail workers, the people who keep the lights on at our buildings and at our infrastructure and so on. So these folks who rely on transit the most are also people who our economy rely on the most. In Stittsville, we are seeing a reduced ridership. On the 200 series buses that operate in the peak morning and afternoon, the ridership has gone quite down, but they are still being used. And also we are still seeing a lot of use on the 61 and the 62. These are buses that serve, I think we're seeing a lot of employees using them along the retail stretch of Hazeldean or some of the manufacturing stretch along Iber Road or Carp Road where we see more shift work happening. So the buses are still being used. And I have a real concern, and so do my council colleagues and OC Transpo management, that if we start to cut back the transit service, we are affecting the people who need it the most and the people, the essential workers of our economy. So we're trying to do everything we can not to put them at a disadvantage by cutting back the buses. Now, you'll ask, well, wouldn't it be fair to cut back if we're seeing a loss in revenue? And we are. We are seeing a big hit in terms of our fare revenue. So far, the federal government has stepped forward to help out municipalities all over Canada to backstop that lost revenue from fares. So that's one way that we are trying to save money. Another way is in the 2021 budget, we are deferring a number of capital projects, so there'll be tens of millions of dollars in savings there. There's also some adjustments being made to hiring and to overtime and so on to backstop that. Now, it's possible that federal government funding could run out, and we're going to know in March or April whether or not the federal government is going to continue funding for the remainder of 2021. If they don't, there is a plan from OC Transpo on service cuts and other ways that we can make up for that drop in revenue. If the federal government doesn't continue that funding, we're going to have a hole of about $50 million that we need to fill, so a $50 million hit to our budget. So that's pretty serious, and there is a plan to address that if that federal funding doesn't come through. The other thing people have asked is why are there been no layoffs? Why have there not been any drivers let go in order to save money? The reason for that is the agreement that we have with the unions doesn't allow us to achieve savings from the get-go. So I suppose, yes, we could lay off hundreds of bus operators, but we wouldn't see those savings until about a year in the future, which doesn't save us any money now. And again, only goes to disadvantage the people who need the transit service the most. The other thing is we are predicting, based on conversations with the major employers in Ottawa, that we will see a return to more normal ridership throughout 2021 and towards the end of 2021. And if we decimate our transit service, get rid of buses, or if we lay off employees, it's going to be very difficult to ramp up that service again towards the end of the year when we will need transit. The other thing too is we need to ensure physical distancing on the buses as well. And if we reduce the number of buses on the road, it means we would have a higher number of people on the buses, which would be a capacity issue and a physical distancing issue. So although it may seem like a simple solution to lay off bus operators, it does create other problems. And the other one that's important to mention too is we're looking at this budgeting from a long term. And what I believe is if we start to make it more difficult and less convenient for people to use the bus, whether it's the 30% of people who are using it right now, or the people who will want to start going to work more often on the bus in 2021, if we make it more difficult, we're going to discourage people from being bus riders. And I think we're going to see more people making a choice to buy a vehicle. And once someone has bought a vehicle, it's very difficult to convert them back to bus riders. So then we've got a longer term ridership issue. So right now, our recommendation from OC Transpo staff and what I supported at Transit Commission a couple weeks ago was not to make any service cuts to OC Transpo right now. It's possible we do that midway through 2021 if we don't get that federal funding. But the reason for that really comes down to we want to make sure that we're supporting the essential workers of our economy who rely on the bus to get to work, to get to appointments, to run errands, and so on. There's a lot of people in the city who this affects. And the other one is part of the long-term plan for transit. We want to make sure that we're still providing a robust and reliable service, not only right now, but also into the future. I hope that gives a little more context. As usual, these things are usually more complicated than they seem. There's a lot of moving pieces, and making a change in one place has some very significant effect to people in another place. I'm happy to answer any questions anytime. You can email me at glenn.gower@ottawa.ca. Take care.